31 on October 16th, 2019, and we will call this meeting to order. Lisa, would you please call the roll?
Anna Marie Dorr. Van Owen.
Present.
Corey Anderson.
Present.
Joshua Judd.
Present.
Patty Cottrell.
Present.
All right, very good. We'll start off here with Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Winter, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Thank you. We are on to item 1D, adoption of the agenda.
Motion to adopt is written. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Patty Cottrell.
Aye.
Joshua Judd.
Aye.
Corey Anderson.
Aye.
Van Owen.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Very good. We are on to item 2, and I don't have any cards for call to the public, so we are on to item 3, superintendent's report. Dr. Lopin, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. On Monday, 447 teachers were issued new laptops as part of our commitment to ensure every student has access to and equity in excellent educational services, resources, and programs. That's MUSD Goal 2. The laptops replace many desktop computers that had aged beyond their useful application. The new devices are a giant step toward the connectivity and innovation necessary in our classrooms today. Thank you to our technology department for delivering a seamless rollout on time as promised. PBIS Arizona recently announced that Pima Butte Elementary School earned the Bronze Achievement Award for the second year in a row, and Maricopa Elementary, Saddleback Elementary, and Santa Rosa Elementary all received Merit Achievement Awards for demonstrating high-fidelity implementation and improved student behavior from using positive behavior intervention and support. That's PBIS. Each awarded school received an award poster, a letter of recognition, statewide publication and promotion of their achievement, and a media kit with press release and publicity ideas. Work like this builds a strong campus culture. To the staffs at Pima Butte, Maricopa Elementary, Saddleback, and Santa Rosa, you are really moving the dial. Thank you. Congratulations to MUSD Governing Board member Patty Cottrell for earning a STAR Award at a recent Pinal County, Arizona School Boards Association event. STAR stands for Superior Training Accomplishments and Recognition. As part of ASBA's Academy of Board Development, awards are presented to individual board members for personal efforts towards professional development as a board member. Mrs. Cottrell's turquoise star indicates she has participated in more than 300 hours of professional development. Additionally, Governing Board President Anna Marie Dorr earned a certificate of boardmanship, and Vice President Ben Owens earned a certificate of orientation. Way to go, Mrs. Cottrell, President Knorr, and Vice President Owens. Yay! Recently, Maricopa High School Marching Rams performed at the AZMBA Rainer Classic, where the color guard received the highest score in any class for high auxiliary. A big congratulations to color guard instructor Eliana Arisa and her assistants Danny Bradley and Alyssa Harper. Overall, the band finished in 6th place amongst a very experienced group of marching band programs. If you want to see the Marching Rams in action, come and cheer them on during senior night. That's this Friday at the football game and at the AZMBA Williams Field show on October 19th. The Maricopa Wells dance team gave an outstanding performance at the D-backs Dance Day on September 29th, prior to the game against the San Diego Padres. Kudos to Mrs. Palm and the team for being such wonderful ambassadors for the Maricopa Unified School District. Looks like everyone had a ball. On October 22nd, the district will host a town hall event to discuss bond facts and answer questions from our community. We hope to see you all there. The event is in the governing boardroom from 6:30 to 7:30. We have an upcoming event. Maricopa Unified School District will host its second annual Veterans Day breakfast on November 8th at 9 a.m. in the Maricopa Unified School District governing boardroom. The event will honor employees and invited guests who are veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces. And that's it for my report, Mr. Owens.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Lopin. All right, we are on to item 4, governing board member reports. We're going to start down there with Ms. Coutray.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Don't have too much to report other than going to the county meeting, which actually was really informative. They started, we had the open discussion, kind of like it was a mini town hall, or is that what? But it was really good to hear that, some of the issues that we are dealing with are kind of centralized to Pinal County, and so to be able to share input with other school districts was really nice. So I really enjoyed that, and of course I wish you and President Knorr were there to receive your awards, but that was pretty cool. I didn't even know I was getting one until I got there and saw the thing. So, but that's all I have. Oh, and please, this is our last home game on Friday night. So Friday Night Lights, please come out and support the Rams. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Judd.
Thank you, President Owens. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to Patty on your awards. Nothing to report since last meeting. However, I will be taking a tour of both Desert Winds Middle School and Maricopa Wells Middle School tomorrow, and then a tour of the high school on Friday.
Very good. Thank you. Mrs. Anderson.
My turn. So I've had the incredible journey the whole month of October to be able to visit just about every county in the state as part of my state school board service. And so it's really incredible to me to see, when I go visit Siloam, which we played in high school when I was in high school, and they really haven't changed much, but to see the school safety issues and to talk to other board members and other administrators on what are their issues as schools has been very eye-opening. So it's really fun because we're taking all this information and we're going to give it back to Superintendent Hoffman because she's got an education safety task force that she's spearheading. And of course the grant that came out, the little bit of $20 million that the state used for school safety, it's been interesting because rural schools have very different financial needs than urban schools because they don't have police forces. They don't have, emergency. A lot of them don't even have medical facilities close by. So to have money for a counselor or, an SRO is very different because first there's no place for them to live and they have to pay travel time for counselors. Their travel time, which is usually about 3 or 4 hours, and then they're there for the day and then they have to travel back. So the safety grant doesn't go quite as far when you're dealing with, Baus, Arizona, which I didn't even know there was a Baus, Arizona, La Paz and Yuma County. So it's been very enlightening to see all the different needs across the state. So tomorrow I'll be at an elementary school in Tucson, and then next week I'll be in Coconino County, Yavapai County, and Navajo County, and get to see what the tribes, kind of what their needs are and what they're doing, and kind of their whole educational line and what their needs are. So it's been a great conversation, like Patty said, at the county meetings, getting to know what each county, what their needs are, what's because we're all different demographics. So it's been very amazing. I have thoroughly enjoyed it and able to bring some of that information back, which is great. This weekend I will also be traveling with the National School Board Association. We'll be in Boise, Idaho. It'll be a little bit chilly. I know Boise. That's okay. But again, at the national school board level, school safety is a hot topic. And so, we're kind of pushing for that federal funding at the school safety level. So I enjoy the conversations. I enjoy seeing what people's opinions are. Some of them are courageous conversations and difficult conversations, but I have enjoyed the process. So I look forward to bringing all that back. I hopefully will be done by the end of October with my state travels and kind of share the gist of what came out of all the county meetings. But it's been a great learning experience for me. So thank you, board, for letting me miss the meeting 2 weeks ago. But I was up in Siloam, so kind of a little drive. But it's been very good. So thank you. I appreciate your patience with my absence.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate that. I guess I don't have a whole lot either. Final home swim meet tomorrow, Copper Sky against Poston Butte. During fall break, we had a couple home swim meets, and we won both of those. So our second year of a swim team,
Yeah.
we're doing pretty well. Excited for what next year's going to hold. And I think that's about all that I've got for right now. Okay. All right, very good. We are on to item number 5, MUSD Cares Customer Service Initiative. And Mrs. Michelle Garcia Perez, take it away.
I'll provide a little context. MUSD Goal 4 calls for us to merit community pride through excellent customer service, sound business practices, excellent communication, and safe and attractive facilities. Tonight, Mrs. Michelle Perez is here to present to you the standards and implementation plan she has designed to help us achieve our goal, and the plan she has cleverly termed MUSD Cares. Mrs. Perez.
Thank you. Good evening, Vice President Owens and members of the board. I am Michelle Perez, and I'm here to discuss MUSD Cares, our new initiative. Excuse me. MUSD Cares is an initiative that we've been working on for the last several months, actually. It's something that we're looking at implementing district-wide. We have been working with principals and with secretaries on the actual package of MUSD Cares. We have been providing everything that they will be able to use and utilize to train their staff on these expectations. I wanted to let you know what MUSD Cares stands for. MUSD Cares is manners, unbeatable, smile, deliver, collaborate, appearance, rehearse, expert, and show empathy. This information has been provided to everyone. Our goal is to ensure that every staff member is trained by December 20th so that we can have full implementation by January 6th. In order to measure this goal, we are going to be having surveys on our district website so that staff members, parents, community can go on there and rate us and let us know what's going on. We are very excited with this new initiative, and as we move along, we'll be implementing new items into it, and hopefully by next year, for the next school year, we'll be adding star parents, which will be parents that can come in and kind of look at looking at our staff to see where we can work on, as well as, and anytime there is a star colleague that shows those excellent MUSD Cares roles, we will be providing, we will be recognizing, that staff member that shows that exemplary customer service with MUSD Cares. So we're really excited to be offering this to our staff. We're trying our best to make sure that we provide that package for our staff members so that they could feel supported, and so that this new initiative gets rolled out as smooth as possible. I'll open it up for any questions.
I have a couple. So I think it's exciting. I think
Yes.
it's great. We've talked about this for a very long time. I know you and I have had conversations over the last 8 years. So when teachers are in their in-service or their professional development, will you have your secretarial staff, who answers the phones, the front office staff, come and do their training at that time, so they kind of form their own cohort when the teachers are doing their cohort? I'm just wondering how you're going to make it work.
Sure, absolutely. We've actually already met with secretaries at the end of August, and we provided all this information to them. In order to ensure that everyone succeeds with this new implementation, we've done posters that shows MUSD Cares, as well as infographics for front office staff and secretaries or anyone who answers phone calls. So the secretaries have already been trained. As far as teachers and staff, that will be through the principals and directors and whomever they direct to follow this process. In this actual package, it includes everything that they would need in order to express this out to their staff. So the secretaries have already been trained.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle?
Yes.
This kudos, I love this.
Thank you.
Are you able to, now that because you started this already with the secretaries, are you able to go out to the schools to see how this is being implemented and see if they're taking what you've, showed them what to do, if they're actually implementing that on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. What we're doing is that this rollout is going to take a little bit of time, so our goal is December 20th, and the actual full rollout will be January 6th. Throughout that process, absolutely, we can take tours of the sites, meet with our staff. We want to make sure that we're supportive and that we're there for them, so we can always offer feedback and make sure to measure and see what we can do to help support our staff at the best possible.
Well, I give you kudos on that first one. It says smile. It says the second one says smile, and people don't realize that even on the phone, even though you're on the phone, if you're smiling, the tone that comes through on the other end is so much different than if you don't. So
Absolutely.
kudos.
Thank you.
Do you have a forum or a way for secretaries and the people that are staff that this impacts directly, for them to come back to you and say, hey, for us, this isn't working. We need to tweak this somehow. How are you addressing that?
We are going to be open to questions and communication throughout the process. I have told the secretaries that they're more than welcome to contact me at any time should they have any questions, comments, or concerns. I'm also going to be implementing a service where all the emails for the secretaries in front office are connected. So should they have a question, they can definitely send that email group the question and we can discuss it. So, excuse me, also with leadership, if they have any concerns or comments, this is something that can definitely be brought back, during our leadership team meetings.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's a really important thing because it's, in a lot of cases, those are going to be the first point of contact that a parent has with our district. So it's a really incredibly important part of that chain of enrolling students with the schools. So the way that communication comes across can be very, very important. Is there going to be any kind of survey that you can conduct maybe at the finality of this to see if it's had any kind of impact?
Absolutely. We are working with the technology department to create that survey that we're going to roll out in January. But we will be, as a program evolves, we will definitely add new items into the list that we can use to measure the success of the program. So that's a great thing to try, so that as the program evolves, we'll know whether it's working and what we can do to modify or tweak the system.
Thank you for your effort.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Any other
And
questions?
I can tell you that I've already seen the changes this year. Just today I had to call my daughter in sick, and it's great when you call in actually a person answering the phone rather than hitting one and hoping that maybe someone answers. You know what I mean? We've all done it. We've all been there.
No, I agree, because I had to call the high school today. And I was surprised when I got a person. I'm like, oh, I don't know what to say now.
They've been
And they
having
were
a person answer
very
since the beginning of
delightful.
this year, and it has
But I
been.
haven't had to call, so I'm just like,
it has
so
been
it's
a
great.
tremendous change to
Yeah.
have that first person, because I know that trying to find a staff member before you'd call trying to get hold of the principal in the previous years, you automated message, but press all the numbers, and none of them connected you with the principal. Although I think that was probably genius, but this is really nice.
Yeah.
And Mr. Dunn makes a really good point, is that these front office people, they have to present themselves as a full package. They have to be professional, they have to be caring, they have to be friendly, and so this is so nice.
Yeah, it was.
Everything that we do, everything the staff does, it could all fall apart at that point
that
if
first
you don't
phone
have
call.
that
Yeah.
person that's being welcoming and making that process for enrollment very smooth, very easy. So it's a
It
very
was,
important
yeah.
part.
And she was very delightful. She was very happy.
Wonderful.
So,
See, then you
Mr.
can
Winters,
do our
you've got a
survey.
happy phone answerer at the high school.
So happy.
So,
Thank you
All right,
very
very
much.
good. Thank you.
thank you,
you.
Michelle.
All right, very good. We are on to item number 6, work study. And is this you or is this Mr. Watson?
Well, I'm gonna set Mr. Watson up, if that's okay with you.
Take it away.
He's the lion's share, but thank you, Mr. Owens. We're committed to creating safe, orderly environments where all students can learn and all teachers can teach. To this end, school administrators benefit from having a range of disciplinary options. Tonight, Mr. Watson, Director of Curriculum, will share information regarding a potential addition to these disciplinary options available in the Maricopa Unified School District. Mr. Watson.
Vice President Owen, Governing Board, Dr. Lopman. I have a couple of things to share with you tonight. The first will be the Alternative to Suspension program. First off, we have to ask ourselves, why do we need an alternative? And that came about when, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we were in this room and we started the strategic planning process. And you see some of the information from the documents we created at that time, and you'll notice needs were identified. The need to have 100% of students enrolled here, to have 80% capture rate of Maricopa students, to have an alternative program, 6 through 12 level. So this falls within those categories. Again, we want to meet the needs of our community. Then, as part of strategic planning, this falls under Goal 1. Every student graduates prepared to create, innovate, lead, and succeed. Under Strategy A, create safe and orderly environments where every student can learn and every teacher can teach. And Strategy D, provide alternative settings for students to maintain enrollment in Maricopa Unified School District. So again, we identified the need a while ago. So we started looking at how do we meet that need, and I sat down with the secondary principals and discussed, what might be an alternative to long-term suspension and what might that look like in our district. And we did a little bit of brainstorming. We talked about what's done in other districts and started going from there. Looking back at the past, this is some of our long-term suspension rates. You'll see that we've had a decline in the number of students we've had that have been long-term suspended over the last 3 years. But again, there is need, and that number could change from year to year. So we have to look at what our alternatives might be if we have a student that we're not quite sure we want to long-term suspend, but we definitely feel the need for something other than a short-term suspension. So then I needed to go in and look at what the current policy had, what do we have already on the books. And when you look at our current policy, it really only addresses a short-term suspension, an alternative for a short-term suspension, and that would be one that is 10 days or less. And really what that means is if the principal or administrator decides that we're not going to go for that off-campus suspension, then we go for something like ISS. But beyond that, there's nothing in our current policy that really addressed an alternative to a long-term suspension. So then we had to look at, what would a revision to that policy or include? So I have worked with an attorney, one of our attorneys, and looked at other districts' policies and regulations. And a proposed revision or amendment, which I've shared sample draft copies of with you, would provide an alternative for long-term suspension. It would kind of describe the process for that to happen with a student. It would add regulation language and an exhibit to our existing policies. And again, you can see the draft copies I've provided from that. In exploring this, I did find out that many districts have had this in place for a little while, so we're catching up. So then you have to ask yourself, what would the alternative to suspension program look like in the process? First off, an administrator would submit it just as if they were submitting a packet for a long-term suspension. So they would submit all of the paperwork that they would have submitted for a long-term suspension for this student, and that would come before the superintendent or superintendent's designee, which would mean like a hearing officer, who would review what was there and look at policy and look at the regulation and exhibit and make a determination as to whether this student would even qualify for an alternative to long-term suspension. And then another part of that process would be, if you're looking at the regulation, a student first off has to admit guilt, has to do that in writing, has to sign, that they have admitted that guilt, and then their parent's signature recognizing that the student that has admitted guilt is there as well. And then once the superintendent or designee has reviewed that information, if they make the determination to place the student in the alternative to long-term suspension program, then they would notify the parent that that was the case rather than moving forward with the long-term suspension hearing, and kind of go over the rules and process for the alternative to long-term suspension program. So in speaking with the secondary principals, we looked at, okay, what could that look like on the campus? We determined that we could use the ISS room. There is an ISS room and an ISS teacher or monitor on each of the secondary campuses. We would look at students who were assigned to this program being escorted to and from that ISS room. They're escorted even to the restroom and to lunch. They're very much monitored because, again, this is a student that has discipline that warranted this. We'd be looking at just putting them in their core classes only with a shortened day. So a high school student would get a 4-hour long day, and a middle school student would get a 5-hour long day, and that kind of goes in accordance with ADM for the state. And we would place them in our online curriculum platform, Odysseyware, and have teachers check in on them and monitor them and grade the work. And then the students would not participate in anything else on campus. Like, they wouldn't be out during lunch, they wouldn't be out before school, they wouldn't be at football games. There's no participation in anything school related or on the school grounds. Really, they're there for that 4 or 5 hour chunk, and that's it. And then looking at the costs, depending on the site, there could be some staffing costs. When we look at the high school, we already have the RAM program in place, and those teachers are using the online platform already with those students, are very familiar with it. Depending on the number of students, which we don't predict would be a large number, because again, you're not taking every student that you would long-term suspend and putting them in the alternative program. It would be some who fit special scenarios and cases. So assuming that those numbers were small, we believe that our RAM Academy teachers can work with those students in grading work and checking in on them and that type of thing. And then at Desert Wind, we currently have a teacher that has lower class sizes than some of the others, just because what enrollment looks like right now. And so we anticipate that teacher can help with the student load, again, in the case that we have some students in this program. But at Desert Wind, we would probably be looking at, at Maricopa Wells, we would be looking at a stipend for a teacher or teachers to work with this student or students that might be placed in this program. On top of that, we have to do some curriculum modification. We would need to go in and look at the online curriculum and kind of break it out by quarter. It's in there by semester right now, but given that sometimes a term for discipline might be at the quarterly break or at the semester break, we need to do some modification of the online curriculum so that it's set up and ready for those type of chunks. So again, we have Title I funds that we use to pay for curriculum development in the district already. So I would be looking at working with some of my teachers who really have that expertise in curriculum development that usually work for me over the summer. And also I have some of those that currently use the online platform Odysseyware, so they would be great candidates to come in and start working on modifying the curriculum. Aside for that, I'm sure you have lots of questions, and I've spent a lot of time working on this, so hopefully I'll have lots of answers for you.
Of course you'll have answers. You'll make them up even if you don't have them.
You bet I will.
No. Not really. I know you know the answers.
Yeah.
Are you going to go, Mrs. Anderson?
You go.
Board?
Okay.
I do have questions, but
Okay, so the figures that you showed us for the long-term suspended for the 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, that's strictly high school, correct?
That is not strictly high school, that's district-wide.
That's district-wide? Okay, so can somebody explain to me how we dropped
I
so
know.
drastically from one year to the other? You went from having 30 to 23, which seems like a normal thing if you're doing what you're doing, but then to go from 23 to 3, that's a huge gap. So either we just got a bunch of great kids that don't do anything wrong, or we're missing the boat somewhere with our discipline. Any clues?
I believe it's a mix of things. I think that, at the high school, Mr. Winter can speak to his efforts to really improve discipline on the campus and what's been going on there. I've had discussions with him about the students that we've had in the past, as well as the students that we have this year. I think that's part of it. I think it's training the students and so forth. I think we also last year really looked at the process for submitting a student for long-term suspension and who really should go there and what type of evidence, documentation you need, what types of discipline incidents really qualify for that. We really spent some time kind of re-educating our leadership on what that would look like. So I think we did have a little bit of a change in philosophy too, and really looking at what type of incident qualifies for a long-term suspension, and have you really spent the time to gather the evidence that would support that?
I'd be curious to see the standard suspension numbers versus the long-term suspension numbers and see if there was a corresponding drop. Because if it's not, then it's systematic, and it just means that we're just not suspending as long.
Okay.
well, and we also put in ISS.
Correct.
In-school
Correct.
suspension, which I think has helped principals identify how to what's really appropriate for each student is I think is added to the drop in long-term suspensions.
Because we get the regular suspension report and the updates, and I haven't noticed a substantial drop-off there, so let's not look too deep into that number.
Okay, so I've got some logistic questions too.
Okay.
We suspend
So
kids from
is there going to be a teacher in this ISS room, or is it just going to be monitored by an employee?
So at the high school, the ISS person is a certified teacher.
Okay.
At the middle schools, it is a classified person, but again, we would task a teacher or teachers with checking in on those students periodically throughout the week to assist them with whatever questions they have on their coursework, to grade that coursework, because obviously you have to have somebody grade it. Not everything in the online platform just gets graded by the computer. There are things that have to be graded by an instructor.
Okay, so, and I appreciate the fact you guys are looking at this quarterly, because not everything falls at the beginning or the middle of the school year. And for the middle schools, it really doesn't affect it as much because it's a restart every year until they get to high school. When we get to high school, it's not a restart anymore, and it's semester, and it's based on those credits that you earn per semester. So if a situation happens midway through the year, so it's a quarterly thing, and they are not going to be continuing the classes that they're in because they're going to be switching over to Odyssey, how is that going to work for the student? Because you've got, they're going to, right, electives, that's off the board, we know that. But they're taking English and math, and maybe they have a history class. So now how is that going to line up with the Odyssey midway through the year?
Right, great question. That's part of what I was talking about when I have to look at those teachers to come in and work on the curriculum. I've already started having some discussions with some of my teachers who work on curriculum over the summer. And for example, Miss Persitz at the high school, she's one of my people who works on summer curriculum. So she's very familiar with what the English curriculum maps look like. She also happens to teach a period of credit recovery at the high school. So she's been in Odysseyware and is very familiar with it. And I've talked about, okay, if I were to give you some time to really line up what's in Odysseyware with what our curriculum maps look like by quarter, could you do that and what might that look like? And yes, I mean, part of the reason that we chose Odysseyware when we chose it was that it is customizable. You can literally go in there and drop and drag things in every order. You can add things to the curriculum. You can take things out. So yeah, that's part of the need to do some curriculum development, is to make sure that we design courses in Odysseyware that align to the map, so that when a student comes out, say at the end of first quarter, the material that they're working on matches with the second quarter material, and then if they go back into third quarter, they're back on pace.
You could essentially have multiple versions of the same course to fit different circumstances for
Absolutely.
What's left for that student.
So, and my understanding was a long-term suspension is typically a year.
I would say that sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's a semester. Really, I've seen both. I'm one of the hearing officers for the district, and I really see both, either a full year or a semester are the most common.
Okay, and I'm glad that there's a certified teacher in the high school. Most of these kids that are going to be going through long-term suspension usually don't have the highest GPA and usually are struggling in their classes. That's typically kind of part of the triggers, what triggers the behavior that lands them in that. So I'm concerned the fact that they're going to be sitting in ISS with this computer and still not understand the work. So they're already struggling in the classroom, but now they're going to be in ISS, and unless we have a teacher that understands the material and is able to assist them, how is this going to benefit them? I just don't want them to get more frustrated, because then they're going to stop coming.
Agreed. I don't think that it replaces what their experience would be in a traditional classroom. It does not. But again, we had to discuss what options we would have for a student who otherwise would not be going to school. They'd be out. They wouldn't be getting anything. So it was, what can we do to kind of hybridize that? And so I think the online system provides a lot of tutorials within it. I think there are videos within it that help. Does it ever replace a teacher? No, I'll never tell you anything replaces a teacher. A teacher is going to teach something much better than a computer ever could. But again, that's why I feel the need to make sure that we're assigning a teacher or teachers to check in on the student regularly, so that when they have those questions with the content, they can get answers. You also have to remember, even if the teacher isn't there live, the system has the capability of letting the student email the teacher and ask questions. It is not a perfect world fit, because again, it does not replace the teacher, but it's an alternative that otherwise the students wouldn't have at all for education.
So I appreciate, and then I also appreciate the fact of the qualifications, that they have to admit the guilt, and the parents have to be on board with this as well. But my other concern is there going to be kind of like a list of, if you do these things, ISS isn't even in the realm of trying to get, so like the infractions, are they going to be clearly listed? So if you do this, there's no way you've got to do long-term suspension, or have a list of these infractions that, yes, you might qualify.
Right. I think if you look at the draft copies I gave you, there's some of that spelled out. It is not completely black and white, and that is purposefully so, because again, every situation, you might say that that this disciplinary incident happened, and this is the 100% consequence for every time. Part of the reason we need this program is that it's not always so black and white. But we do have to look at what would be in that proposed draft that I have there for you, and look at those criteria, because again, we've got to be able to justify why we either did or did not qualify the student for that. And that was part of the discussion I had with the attorney as well, is that there have to be some criteria in there. Otherwise, you could be accused of bias, and then you set yourself up for an OCR complaint and things like that. So I think if you look at the language there, there is language there that helps us determine who would qualify and who would not. But it's not super black and white, because again, that's the whole purpose of having this alternative to long-term suspension program, is that there will be times where it's a gray area, and that's why we need something to fit that. And I also want to remind you, I think you get this, you wouldn't be looking at all of these students who we're putting forward to long-term suspension being in this program. Right. I mean, being put forward for long-term suspension is a very serious thing, and usually means we don't want you on campus. It's done. We're going to move forward with the hearing, and that's it. But we've had experiences, and the secondary principals can tell you, I can tell you from being a hearing officer, where there are times that there's just some gray area there, and you wish that there was something in between, and we haven't had that.
So on the, I noticed that, the hours are not going to be there the entire day, the 4 hours and the 5 hours. Are you staggering that so it starts after the school day starts, so that they're not with the general population coming in? And are they having to go through the front office?
Yes, that's a great question. I discussed that with the secondary principals. We would prefer that they start later, so that they're, again, not on campus hanging out with students before the day starts. So they'll have a later start where they would check in at the front office and then be escorted from the front office to the ISS classroom. And again, when their day is over, they would again be escorted back to the front office to check out.
There's no transportation whatsoever offered?
There's not, because again, that was a concern. I mean, if they're that extreme that you've moved to that, we just don't want them mixing with the general population, so to speak.
Okay. Well, you've answered my questions. Thank you.
Good. All right.
All right. Now it's my turn. Wait, did you have questions?
I was easy.
I will. They'll come up.
I'm sure they're like my questions. So I am excited that we are able to offer another opportunity for students to be successful, because as we know, all of our scholars, Dr. Robinson, they all learn differently, and situations are not always the best for every single student. And I have been a proponent of an alternative program since I was a high school teacher. So, and we're one of the few high schools that doesn't even provide anything, so I'm excited that we are starting to gravitate towards being able to help our students be successful. So with that, because I did look through this, because I've looked at Deer Valley has a really good alternative program, and their alternative program also includes some of their special education students, that their behavior, and I know ours, we have to bus them out of campus. But on the proposal that you gave us, which is JKDR, page 2. So just some suggestions as we're going forward looking at this. So I see everything the students are supposed to do to be a part of this program. They've got to come with their books and their paper and their pencil, and they got to be on time, and they've got to they've got requirements, because this is really a privilege to be offered this. So I would just like to see us, if the student has to sign a contract so that they understand, and in that contract there is a time frame that, okay, the first day I can see you don't show up with your supplies, but guess what, second day you're done. I mean, is there a time frame? Is there, because we're trying to correct a behavior.
Right.
So I would just suggest that on that page 2, that there either be a contract or something that the parent and student sign that say, I will be prepared the first day of class, right. And if not, I've got 3 days or whatever you decide, whatever the principals decide, I've got however many days to get my act together, or it will be a 1 year out.
Right.
So I just because there's nothing in there for time frame, and so this looks really nice on paper, but if we don't have a timeline where, you know what, this is your, you have to do this or you're out. I mean, this is kind of an olive branch that we're helping them. So help me out. Is there something in plan for that?
Yes, I'm glad you bring that up. Mrs. Coutray asked something similar to that and some
Correct.
questions that she posed to Dr. Lopman, and so I conferred with the attorney yesterday. Again, when we start the program, which we would hope to do potentially in January, there would be some rules and guidelines that, yes, you would lay out for the student,
Okay.
along with something like a contract that would not necessarily be seen in policy, but
Right.
would be the practice.
Okay.
And I would hope that when we get that all put together, that could become another exhibit
I was going to say
in
it's
here,
an exhibit.
another
Mhm.
exhibit.
Okay.
Because we also talked about attendance and,
Right.
the frequency of attendance or lack thereof. And I also consulted the attorney too. So if we do put them in this program and then that doesn't work out,
What's the next
where
step?
are we at?
And how long do we let it go before we decide it's not going to work out?
Correct.
I mean, obviously, they're in this situation for a reason.
Right. And then we look
So-
to move them back to long-term suspension. Yeah.
Okay.
But don't they have to have a hearing to do long-term
Yeah,
suspension?
it's still a hearing.
But the hearing to go to this program, there's not a hearing to go to this program.
Yes, it's part of the long-term suspension hearing.
So you would submit the packet to go to hearing, and then either the superintendent or designee would make the decision whether you're moving forward with the hearing to pursue long-term suspension or whether you're going to recommend them to the alternative program.
So they could go into the alternative program without having a hearing for long-term suspension.
Correct. So if they broke some rules
Yeah.
in the program, we would move back to the hearing. We would take the old packet, add to it with the current discipline issues that are occurring in the program, and proceed with the hearing to long-term suspend.
Okay.
So like I say, I would just like to see a timeline or, expectations
Yeah.
for success,
Yeah.
basically, because we want them to be successful. And then in the very first paragraph, it says, successfully completing the alternative to suspension program will not reflect a long-term suspension. Will it reflect something on their transcript? I mean, I don't agree with that. Will not. I think that there needs to be something that reflects that they were in this program.
Discipline does not show up on a transcript. It's not on a high school
But it's in the
transcript.
school- it's in
It's
the-
in your records. It would be
Correct.
part
It's
of
in
your
the
discipline
student's
records.
Right.
So, yes, we could record that in Synergy
But it would
as a
only-
discipline, yes, and we could code it as alternative program, yes.
Because just the way it's written here, it just says will not reflect, and I just want to make sure that it reflects as something, because
Yes,
obviously they're in this situation.
absolutely. And we would need to record it for our records, yes, have some type of record of what that disciplinary consequence would be, so that would be what we would record in the system.
Okay. And then one last thing, and I noticed on, I think it's the discipline cover sheet maybe, or maybe it's the other one, but there was a community service piece that some students could be assigned community service while they're in this alternative program.
Oh,
Yep.
that was on the cover sheet,
And
yeah.
so I would suggest, and maybe you already have, that we get with Judge Riggs, because because I've had many conversations with him, and he's completely on board with working with us and kind of working within the judicial system. And so I just would like to put that little breadcrumb in there,
Yeah,
because
great.
he's all over it.
That's a good resource,
And
yeah.
so is Sheriff Lamb, and so is Chief Stahl. So they would all like to see something besides just turning them loose on the streets.
Right.
But I would say, we've already talked about it. I've talked about it with all of them, and they're like, when you're ready, we're ready.
That's great,
Okay,
yeah.
that's all I got. I'm just excited. I'm excited for our students to have something to be successful.
I know you and I've talked about this for a while.
I know.
Are they going to have computers in the ISS room?
Not for every student, but obviously a student who was assigned to this, yes. Because you couldn't really do the work
Right.
without it, yeah. And I've already talked to technology about how we could
Okay.
accommodate that.
Okay.
Mr. Judd?
Yeah, actually, Member Anderson brought up one of the things that I was going to mention, which was that community service piece, that I think that would be definitely something that we should include. That's creating an expectation of going above and beyond, that we're extending an olive branch here to keep you aboard with this, but what are you going to do for the community in return? So I think that that's a good thing to include. Also, in terms of having online access to classes I think is really the key component of making this possible. I sat in one of those classrooms as an instructor, and I think one of the most important things that we have, whoever that instructor may be, is an instructor that's going to be willing to help regardless of what the course is that student is currently enrolled with. Right. They can be certified in different areas, even if they're just certified in one area, that they be willing to help and learn the course content. Right. Because I recall sitting in a classroom, and I wouldn't be able to sit in a classroom and have a student ask a question and not respond, and not have the answer or be willing to help them. So whoever that individual is needs to be willing to go beyond just their knowledge of their certified area and be willing to help with multiple subjects.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up. It's a great point. Part of the plan that I didn't bring up is that you also would need to, I would also need to, train those people who are in those rooms on the OdysseyWare system, because even if you're not the teacher of record for the content, you need to know how to navigate that system in and out. You need to know where the answer keys are, because yes, I hear you. I can remember having to sub in a class when I was an administrator and having to step into an upper level like calculus class and try to even read the answer key to the students. So yeah, there needs to be training involved for those ISS teachers. They need to have access to the system. They need to know where they can find answers when the kids get stuck, how the system works. Yeah, there's a lot there, and I've already talked to OdysseyWare about what that training would look like and how we can move forward with that.
I think it's a great addition. It gives us an option, and I think it's a great idea. So thank you for all the work you've done.
So I guess one question that I've got is, you're talking about having RAM teachers at the high school, and then classified at the middle schools. And anywhere those students go within our building, they're going to be escorted. How do we properly do that? I mean, because just thinking through my mind, I don't know how many students are going to be in this, and it could fluctuate quarter to quarter. I get that. But logistically, how do you do that?
I had a good conversation.
Principal Winter.
I had a good conversation with these two gentlemen here in the audience about, what they even do for an ISS student. And there's a lot of, having security escort those students wherever they're going on campus.
That's what they're there for.
And that's again, what you would need to do with a student in this scenario. You check in at the front office, you wait for security to come get you, deliver you to the classroom. The ISS teacher, I talked to Mr. Winter about how, there are scheduled restroom breaks, and the ISS teacher goes with the students for that restroom break. And lunch is in between regular lunches for the student. Again, they're escorted there by the ISS instructors. So yeah, there's a need to keep them isolated, which is kind of spelled out here as well, is that's the intent, is we're going to still make every effort to give you an education, but you've been restricted.
It's not going to be fun.
No.
It's not supposed to be.
There are some programs that actually bring the lunch to the classroom.
Right. And that could be an option as well. Yeah.
My concern is that these classrooms are going to be on campus.
Right.
So even if they're moving, there's going to be some interaction, but the less interaction that they can have, the better off we are.
Absolutely. And I also want to remind you again, we're not putting every student who goes up for long-term suspension in this room.
Right.
Right.
We're going to be selective.
Okay.
Cool.
Very good. Any other questions, board?
Not this one.
Okay.
What's
very good.
That's the only question I have.
All right, we are on to item B, online high school. Dr. Holton, Mr. Watson.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Vice President Owens. According to the demographic study completed in the spring of 2018, Maricopa Unified School District captures approximately 58% of the school-age population in the city of Maricopa. While this capture rate signifies an increase, Our vision for an 80% capture rate compels us to diversify our programming in order to meet the needs of more Maricopa school-age children. Mr. Watson is here to present our plan to add to the options available to Maricopa students through the expansion of the online programming. Mr. Watson.
All right, so I've spent about a year and a half on this, actually, really looking at the online program and what we could do to make it work for us. Again, we look at why are we even considering an online program, and again, it comes back to what Dr. Lopman just said when we sat down with our community, when we looked at our strategic planning. It was something that our community wants and needs. I'm sure you're very well aware we have students who are taking online courses elsewhere, and that sometimes is a good thing and sometimes is a bad thing, and I can't tell you how frequently I get calls from parents asking if we have our own online program because they prefer that it were local and with us. So when we look at identifying the need under Goal 1, every student graduates prepared to create, innovate, lead, and succeed. Strategy C says provide multiple paths to graduation to meet the diverse needs of all students. A little over a year ago, I worked with a committee of teachers, parents, and administrators, and we started looking at these multiple paths, one of them being the AP capstone path that we brought in last year. And then also one of those paths was an online school. We know that in the past we had an online program that was prior to me starting here, and it was not successful in the end. So we need to learn from what happened there and make sure that we don't recreate the same thing. But again, we still have a community that's expressing a need and a want for online classes or online school, especially one that is local, wherein if a student were to struggle, when you look at an online environment, many have teachers who provide office hours, so if you do get stuck, you could come meet with a live teacher. Currently, if you're taking an online class with Primavera, you don't have that option. I mean, you can email them, you can talk to them on the phone, maybe have a video conference, but you can't come meet with a live teacher. So I think, again, having our own program helps meet that need that our community doesn't really have right now. We also looked at the platform that would be used. Conveniently enough, we were already looking for a new platform to support RAM Academy and also to support credit recovery. And so as we were looking for that platform, I kept in mind, would this work for an online school? And as I brought people in to look at the platforms that were being proposed, we would talk about what would that look like if it were used as an online school platform. Again, we have students that are already taking classes with other schools and other entities, and we also had to look at, if we have a student who is long-term suspended, even one that we don't put in the alternative program, is there something we could provide for them? So this, again, might meet that need. And then we also have the reality of the online learning environment that is a part of our world today. If you go to a college or university, you're more than likely going to have at least one online class. And it was interesting in exploring some of the platforms. One of the vendors was out of Florida and informed me that the state of Florida now requires every high school student to take at least one online class in high school, and a part of that is to prepare them for the reality of a lot of post-secondary institutions having an online platform. So again, it just strengthened the idea that we have a need for an online program. So then again, we have to look at how do we get started. The first thing we did, as I said, is we started looking at vendors that would provide a curriculum that really met our needs. And again, I brought in teachers who had been working with our old platform, our old online platform that we were using in RAM and credit recovery, and had them look at the curriculum platforms that the vendors were presenting, and we talked about what tech issues we might have had with the other. For example, Flash. The old platform ran Flash, and that a lot of times would freeze up our computers and provide all kinds of issues. So that was one of the first questions a lot of the RAM teachers asked as a vendor was presenting was, does your system require Flash? And if they said yes, they were like, oh, we're done with you. We had conversations like that. We also looked for a company who had customer support that was during our hours of operation. We ran into that issue with RAM, with our old platform. Customer service closed by the time RAM Academy was still in session, so if something happened, you're trying to make a call and nobody was there. So all of those things were part of consideration when we're looking at what that online curriculum platform would look like. We also wanted to look at a platform that provided a larger menu of courses. We really wanted something that had more electives. That was one of the struggles we had with the old platform. There were not as many elective choices. As we move forward and look at an online school type of scenario, you need to look at honors classes and AP classes. So you had to look for a vendor that also provided that type of coursework in their platform. So again, as we looked at Odysseyware, those were all needs that we found being met there. And then we did start piloting Odysseyware this past spring to get teacher feedback, to meet with the trainer, to have conversations with the vendor about what we liked or didn't like, and to talk about, okay, again, what might this look like next year? If we were to modify it, what would it look like? That was another big criteria for us, was that it was a modifiable curriculum in the event that we needed to, because that comes up. Part of this exploration was also looking at what other districts are doing. I took a team to Chandler to visit their online platform and had some good conversations with their administrator of their program there. They've had it in place for a little while, so I got to talk about, kind of the growth and development of their program. I had a good conversation with the people from Mesa Distance Learning. Mesa Distance Learning is one of the first that was in the state, and yes, it's very well spoken of. And they were very helpful. We got a lot of good information from them about what to do and what not to do, and how to make things operate. Looked at Gilbert, who uses a very similar platform to Chandler, and just had a lot of good discussions to kind of help us set things up correctly. And all of them, of course, were willing to partner with us and enroll our students in their program, which again just says even more, we need our own, because they're anxious to take our kids, for sure. So then you have to also take into consideration what are the associated costs. When we were looking at the vendors for the online platform, obviously cost was something to consider. Luckily, really, Odysseyware was the standout from those that we looked at. That was the one we were the most happy with. And when it came down to it, Odysseyware was only $479 more than the platform we were paying for already for use with RAM Academy and credit recovery. So that was not a large expense in our books. And I think you'll also see, I included a sample up there for you. This is a listing of all of the courses that are offered in Odysseyware, and I think
extensive.
Yeah. I mean, you look at all the CTE options. You look at there's AP options. So we kind of felt like $479 was a deal, a good bargain for us, to get so much more bang for our buck and really be able to meet the needs of not only our credit recovery students and our RAM Academy students, but in the future, moving forward with an online program and having some offerings that would attract students to the program. Odysseyware had some good options. I think on top of that, you also obviously have to look at the teacher cost involved. We would have to look at a stipend model for teachers. I will tell you, a common model when I spoke to other districts was paying by the student. So like the number of students you have. And something that I found very interesting is some of the districts pay one amount for just the student being enrolled, and then a larger amount for one that completes the course, which I think is cool, because that's motivation for the teacher to really keep track of the student and work with the student to make sure that they finish, which is a key to that school being successful, which is part of what we had troubles with in the past with our old online program. So Those would be costs that are associated with that. But also consider that if we get a student back that we otherwise would not have, who would be a full-time online student, we collect an ADM on that student. You know, there's a dollar amount attached to that, which could very easily pay for a teacher stipend or teacher stipends to teach these students. So then we had to start looking at what does that look like. Last year I was all ready to present this to you. I thought that we were good to go with the online program because we had been approved in the past for an online school, and we were still on the books as having an approved program. But something I found out late in the game last year was that if you wanted to make any changes to the program that were different from the original application, they basically wanted you to reapply all over. And I said, you know, the biggest change would be we would be looking at a new curriculum, and so that required a whole new application for the state, and that is coming due this month, the end of October 31st. The application is due. There's a 26-page application from the state that I completed over fall break and will be hand delivering to the Board of Ed next week. Once we submit that, they come out and do a visit to kind of have us walk through the logistics of what we're proposing to see if we can really do what we're saying we can do, and that we're kind of ready for what we're proposing with them. And then we will get graded both on what was written in the application and then also graded on that visit that they make to us, and then we will hear if we are approved by the state in February to open our own online school. I think from there, then obviously we start marketing it with our students. We start really marketing it with the community, letting them know that that option is there. I can't tell you again the number of times I have parents referred to me, you know, with curriculum issues and, oh, I want to homeschool my kid. Do you have an online program? So the need is there, and I think we'll need to make sure that we really get it out there. I think you also know in dealing with other student populations, there's a need even to be able to take one singular class online for a student who's trying to get ahead, or for a student who has some kind of health complications, who has a reduced day. So we really want to make sure that we're marketing it to all of those student populations so that we get the enrollment in that program that we hope to do. I think we need to meet with our counselors and make sure they're really prepared to sell the program, and that they also understand what the program is. I think that's key too, and part of why we were not so successful before is it's not a good idea to take a student who's failing all of their classes and say, here, we'll put you in an online program. That'll work for you. Or a student who's severely behind in credits. We have programs for that. I'm really happy to say that, Ram Academy has been very successful, and that's a model for that type of student. So again, this is really creating a different pathway than what we have, and we have to make sure that we're steering the right students to the programs that we have and the paths that we're creating so that they are on the appropriate path. And part of that, when we roll out the online program, is really monitoring the students closely. And I've discovered this in talking to the other districts. And you have to monitor the progress of the students, make sure that they're making the adequate progress every week. When they're not making the adequate progress, you start putting things into place, like you've got to show up to a physical space to work on that class. Until you're caught up. If you are off track too many times, then you're done. This is not the good program for you. We need you to go back to main campus, or if you're deficient in credits, maybe you're going to go to RAM. If whatever is appropriate for the track that you're on and the path that you're on. So all of that is part of training with the counselors and part of marketing to the right audience so that we get the appropriate students in the appropriate path for them. And then we need to staff. We need to look at making sure that we have highly qualified staff teaching the course. You remember a comment made in the board meeting a while back about how a student was taking a class in Odyssey Ware, but the instructor didn't even no French or no Spanish. So it's important that, if you're offering a Spanish class, you have a Spanish instructor assigned to that class who can grade the work and instruct when needed. Because an online class is rarely just done in isolation with the computer. There's communication that goes back and forth with the teacher. And one of the things I like about OdysseyWare, there are a lot of projects and or written assignments that the teacher actually grades and gives feedback to. So it's important that you have a qualified instructor. So again, we'll have to make sure that we're looking to staff the requests and needs of the students who do choose to enroll with us. Looking forward, we're hopeful that we get at least 30 full-time students and 100 part-time students going into the following year. So start of 2020-21 school year. We're hopeful that we'll get 130 total students, 30 of those being full-time and 100 part-time. I really believe the part-time will be easy. That's a student who just wants to sign up for a class. I'm just real interested to see what the full-time will look like, because again, I do field a lot of calls from people looking for that. So
you feel fairly certain that you could get 30 full-time students in a snap?
I don't think that I would get 30 like that without pushing. I think I need to make some push and do some marketing and advertise. I know I'll get some right off the bat, but 30, I think we need to market and set that goal. Again, we have the need, whether they're full-time or part-time, we have the need. We will undoubtedly have part-time students sign up for it, and we'll see what happens with full-time. Again, I think it's a benefit either way, but having the option for a student to go full-time online will be nice to have. So what does this look like in the future as we grow and or expand the program? Obviously, we can look at growing it out to other grade levels. One of the beautiful things of OdysseyWare, I think you'll notice when you look at the course listing, is it does go all the way down to the middle school level. So we could market it to that group of students. I have had opportunities to work with a lot of homebound students. A student who's been placed on homebound because of medical needs and so forth, that comes through my office. And I know some of those students, that's a real good option for them, but we just haven't been able to meet that need yet because we don't have the program in place. Again, thinking of those students who are long-term suspended that are not part of the alternative program that we may put in place, it's an option. It's an option for them to continue their education because otherwise they may not have one. And a lot of those students do turn to things like Primavera and Mesa Distance Learning. So again, having a local option meets those needs. I'm super excited at a later date to start diving into the AP Honors type of course. It isn't something I would want to roll out in the first year because I'd really like to work out the kinks of just a regular path first. Because we've got experience with developing new programs, and when we opened RAM Academy, we had to work with things and tweak things and fix things. So I'd like to take that first year to really start developing what that would look like for the honors. And that'll involve, my teachers who work on curriculum, doing some curriculum development with those courses. We'll need to work with the College Board to make sure that we have appropriate AP instructors and that they're trained, and we submit the syllabus, because that's part of being able to offer an AP class is submitting the syllabus for approval with the College Board. So all of those types of things. That's something I will be anxious to expand, but again, I want to do it
slowly.
Yep, so that we can do it correctly. And then looking forward in the future, we may want to consider, when we get this program working the way we want to, requiring students to take an online class, because again, knowing that the reality for most of them going on to college is that they'll take an online class, it might be something we want to introduce in the future to say our students are prepared for that when they go. I found that a really interesting idea when I heard about that from one of the vendors, and I thought that makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense.
So that's all I have for you, and I'll take whatever questions you have.
Do you want to go first, Tori?
Sure. Again, I'm excited because I remember when we had it before, and it was, what was it called? I don't know what it was called.
Maricopa Online.
but it was the software, the
platform.
programming, the platform was atrocious.
Greenways Academy.
Krista's going.
Yes.
So it sounds like you've really done a deep dive and really figured out those kinks based on past history. So thank you for that, because we wasted a lot of money before. And so it sounds like we're really going to get the bang for our buck, because it's Odysseyware, which we're already going to be using for the alternative suspension program, for the RAM Academy. So it sounds like we're really going to be able to use this software across the board. So cost is minimal compared to having to purchase new curriculum. So I'm excited that we're able to use the same technology for all of the platforms and for all the classes. So I'm excited. I think it's one more opportunity for our students to be successful and to offer all different ways that they can learn. So thank you for the information and for the research. I would like to put a plug-in for the teacher stipends, that when we do that, it is on a two basis, two-step, I guess, where they get one fee for the enrollment. They don't get the second, they get the second fee for the students that complete the class with maybe a C or better. I mean, I don't know, whatever you decide, but I do like that two-step program for stipends. So that's it. I look forward to seeing more. Give me more.
All right.
I have a few more questions.
Okay.
So with the online school, how's that going to affect the students' transcripts? So if they're going to be a full-time online school, okay, that's a different school ID. So how is that going to meld into, are they ever going to come back to MHS? Are those records going to be combined? And if they're a part-time student and they're taking these online classes, how is that going to affect, because I know that one of the big issues that we had was the skewing of the GPA and the class ranking because the extra classes being submitted. So how are we going to track that so that it is fair for the kids that aren't taking those extra classes, that are just taking your school hour?
Great question. So for a student who is full-time, obviously they would have their own school ID. It is set up that way. That's why you have to go through approval with the state and so forth. So the transcript would come for Maricopa Virtual Academy. It would not say Maricopa High School. It would say Maricopa Virtual Academy.
So they wouldn't graduate at Maricopa High School?
That's something we could look at.
Okay.
But I will tell you that a lot of the online programs have their own graduation. They do their own ceremony.
Okay.
But it is something we could look at as well if we wanted to combine the two. In terms of transferring in and out of credits, which I think is kind of what you're asking and how that would be applied to credit, it would just be like any other transfer in and out coming from any other school as to how it gets added to the transcript. The benefit of it being our own program is we're going to know what those classes are equal to within our own course catalog. And in fact, we'll do a real good job of coding them in Synergy so there is a nice parallel match so we know what to offer up.
Is that going to skew the GPA?
Skew it, no. I mean, if a student takes more classes than required, obviously that the GPA calculates the way it does.
Okay.
So I will tell you from my experience in a previous district, a lot of the times the students who were the top 10 were students who took way more credits above and beyond. So that is an opportunity for our students if they wanted to do that, if they're looking to boost their GPA. Again, though, I think that's something we'd be looking at down the road as we added honors and AP track classes, because without the weighting of a class, there's not as much motivation for those who are really playing the GPA game to take those courses. But I wouldn't see it as an unfair advantage, because every student would have the opportunity, especially if it's our own program, to do exactly the same thing. If they want to take more classes, they could take more classes.
And is there going to be a cost associated? So let's say they're a full-time student already with MHS. but they want to take they want to be a part-time student of our online high school. Is there going to be a cost to these classes since they're already enrolled in our high school?
That's a great question as well. So what a lot of the other districts do, and what I would like to see us do, is you set a cap on the number of classes that can be taken free. And a lot of districts, that's, if you could take 6 classes during the regular day, then it might be 7 classes you could take total within district, or 8 classes. You set a cap as to the number that can be taken for free. And then, yes, you start to price out, if somebody were to go above and beyond that, what might that look like price-wise?
Okay. I really appreciate all the hard work that you put into this. I am remiss in, I didn't even know that you've been working on this. Which kind of bothered me a little bit, because I'd like to know what was going on, and I appreciate all the hard work that was put in place. What kind of irks me, and I've said this before, is feeling like we're rushed to make decisions, because I know this is going to come back up at the next board meeting because you have a deadline. When I know you've put a lot of hours and a lot of time into this, and this is needed, and it's welcomed, but I just don't like the last minuteness of it.
Got it.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think also related to that is that because the resources that we're going to expend simply to apply, I mean, there is no cost to apply, and the costs are associated with enrollment. We may have some marketing costs.
Yeah.
If there's anything necessitates a policy change or anything like that, and how that is funneled through this board, obviously, the timeline is relative. We certainly want to submit, but we're looking at
Our next
still
meeting would
7
essentially
months.
just be.
Well, we don't
We're
even
approving
need to.
a new
Right.
school.
But what we're doing is it's for the application.
Correct.
It's not saying that once we
Yeah, we're
put that
not-
forward at that
yeah.
point, that it's a fixed
Yeah.
in stone
Right.
situation.
It
So
means
we can
that
continue
if we
to discuss
wanted to
the
move,
way-
it doesn't even mean we're approved.
Right.
It means if we want to continue, we can.
Right.
And we remain completely open to that, and I certainly apologize for any sense of feeling rushed. You're right. This was not, I did not inform you periodically of the accomplishments that Mr. Wade was making. I mean, he truly has been
yeah, you can tell.
methodically advancing towards this outcome.
And it's much appreciated, Wade. It's not, I
No,
do
I
much,
get you, yeah.
and I look forward to this, and I think we definitely need something like this, and I'm in full support of it. So, and thank you.
Just had to add, having had done this for a year, that rigor is a very, very important aspect of this. And that plagiarism, those kind of things are going to become a very big issue when you're talking about online. So whoever the instructors are that are going to be in charge of this, they have to maintain that. Because if word gets out that this is an easy online class, then you're going to have kids picking and choosing the way they want to go to school. And it can become a very bad thing if it's not done properly. So it's something that I just can't push that home enough, that it's very important that rigor needs to be maintained. In addition, the content needs to be changed. It can't stay consistent. If it stays consistent, you're going to have siblings. Here you go. Here are my notes. Here are the answers. Here is the assignment. And you'll see that revolving door of work just being turned in. So not only does the rigor have to be maintained, but the content needs to be altered and changed periodically.
Great point, and we were already experiencing that with our credit recovery. Having credit recovery in place for the last almost 6 years and using an online platform with that, that's something that we've had to be aware of, and that yes, you have to just keep growing with it and evolving. And part of looking at Odyssey where we wanted something more rigorous. I really liked that there are a lot of Dropbox activities, things that have to be graded by an instructor, which make it much more difficult to cheat. And then just one other thing to add is that when I had discussions with a lot of the other districts, one of the requirements is that you come take the final exam live. And if you do not pass the final exam, no matter how you did on the rest of the coursework,
essential.
You don't pass the class. So if you cheated your way through it, you come in to sit for the test and don't pass the class, you don't pass the class.
I like
If you don't pass the test.
It's essential because it's very easy for students to be able to get through online content, and how do you really even verify that they're learning what you're teaching? And I think by doing that, that's the catch-all. So I appreciate that fact that you included that at the end. Thank you.
I have just a couple questions. So if we've got a student that's enrolled full-time, would they be allowed to play sports for MHS or for Maricopa?
Yes, because they'd still be part of our district, yes.
Some of our homeschooled kids are able to play sports.
Absolutely, yes.
They don't attend classes, but they're able to get that.
Well, as long as they're not enrolled in a different district.
Right.
Those homeschool kids, if they're enrolled in a different online school, they cannot play for us.
Right. But those, we do have
That's
some.
against the EIA rules, I believe.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I'm wondering is about summer school. Is this something that would be offered during the summer as well? You know, my daughter and I actually had this conversation today where she said, hey, I think that I want to take a class this summer to get ahead so I can potentially look at taking some other electives next year. All right, sweet. So, I mean, is that something that would be available?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that's part of the plan too, is it allows us to expand our summer school offerings. I think it also is a little easier to recruit a teacher who doesn't have to be on a physical space the entire time to instruct the class,
So,
Gotcha.
would they have to be, do they have to like complete their freshman year before they would be able to enroll in these extra classes? Because I know like even with our college, you know, they've got that early start college, the summer college classes, that partnership that we have with CAC, but they can't start it until after like their the summer of their sophomore year. So would our online program, would the incoming freshmen be able to take it, or would they have to complete a freshman year before they would be able to take those classes?
if you were to ask me, and I think that you could probably ask Mr. Winter as well, I think that you'd be digging disservice if you didn't offer it to the incoming freshmen as they started, because they're going to go take it somewhere else.
Exactly.
Okay.
And even some 8th graders. You've
Yeah.
got some middle school kids that want to take.
Right.
Okay.
They want to start.
Right.
Yeah. So would this online ID that we're applying for,
Mhm.
is that have to be defined as grade specific just for high school, or can that be?
That's a great question. In the application, I have it as grades 6 through 12, so that it would
Okay.
allow us to expand down.
Yeah, that's what he said in
Okay.
there too.
Just
Yeah.
want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 6 through 12.
Mhm.
You've done your homework.
I spent a little while on this, yeah.
I'm impressed.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Watson. It's quite apparent that you know your stuff on this.
Thank you.
And very, very well put together presentations.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your time. I know we all do.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, very good. We are on to item 7, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Aye.
Aye.
I,
Aye. All right, very good. Motion carries. And we are on to action item.
My favorite one.
It's pretty straight.
Mr. Beckett?
Thank you,
Take it away.
Vice President Owens, members of the governing board, Dr. Loebman. You have the personnel schedule in front of you tonight. I do have one change that I would like to offer. I would like to table number 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 from the list. There are some additional information that we need to compile and get to the board before we make this final decision. And so respectfully, we're asking you to please pull those.
Okay. But 26 is staying on there.
26 will be staying on
Okay.
there. And Mrs. Anderson, I can address that at this point in time.
Sure.
Mrs. Anderson had asked me before the meeting if there were any cost implications to this particular change, and there is none. This is a cost-neutral
Okay.
reclassification. And I'll take any other comments or questions at this point in time.
So, Mr. Beckett, I didn't see any budget implications for any of these, the new employees or the,
Well, they're replacing.
That is correct.
because the new employees are
rolled.
replacing the ones
Yeah.
that.
That's
okay.
correct.
All right.
Right.
So everything is neutral. That's awesome.
Unless there's any further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to pass with the amendments that you've mentioned.
And I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Patty Tribe?
Aye.
Joshua Jones?
Aye?
Cory Anderson?
Aye.
Ben Owens?
Aye. Motion carries. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. We're on to 8B, discussion and possible approval of the first reading of updated policy JICA. And Dr. Lopman, would you like to kick us off on this one?
Sure. At a couple meetings ago, the board was curious regarding the opportunity for our school level administration to review the changes and compare them to their practices and expectations and work at the school. What was this going to look like in its practical application? So we shared the policy with them before fall break, gave them some time to think about it, and again, brought it up yesterday during our leadership meeting, and also opened our student handbook and compared the dress code in its specificity compared to the changes in the policy. And we had some discussion. It became clear that even with the greater specificity in this policy, it is still umbrella-like compared to the specificity in our student handbook.
In our handbook.
And it doesn't it doesn't require us to change anything in the handbook because it's, you know, broad in nature, and then the specifics are still aligned. We had some discussion about the fact that administrative discretion still exists, and just talked about some of the specifics, like some of the actual specific garments and so forth, and the conditions
Or
that
lack of.
were or lack of that were, you know, that existed in our handbook but did not exist in the policy. So, but because the policy is broad and, you know, more general than the student handbook, we had acceptance. We had, you know, endorsement of this policy in its first, in the way it appears in its first reading.
Should we, this is just a question to the board, should we take our handbook, our two handbooks, the elementary and the secondary, and that part about the dress code, put that in as an exhibit to this policy?
You mean take the one out of the handbook and put it into our policy as an exhibit?
Uh-huh. For the secondary and elementary. Just so that it's kind of like covering our butts so somebody can't come and say, well, this is just in your handbook, but it's not in your policy. But if we had it as an exhibit, it exists in our,
You could, but we could also just at the top of in the handbook, when we print the handbooks next time, just refer to policy JICA
Okay.
and JICAR.
do we
And
have that currently in our handbook?
I don't remember ever seeing a policy referred to, but
I don't know if there is or not, but there's some legalities referenced in there.
Yeah.
We had talked about changing the regulation to make it without being specific to the actual
specific,
details
yeah.
in the student handbook. We had discussed the possibility of changing that regulation to just reflect the school
This.
level
Handbook.
student handbook.
Yeah.
Without going into
Yeah, that's-
a ton of detail.
Yeah.
even as it exists here in this printed regulation. Those regulations, we can change those independent of the board, so it's something that we could discuss. It's still open for discussion. Yeah.
Because I think, the dress code, the less you say, the better. If it's more of an umbrella, then it gives.
Right, but I would like one to reference, or some sort of cross-reference of the two.
I could see that. I could see just putting policy, dress code policy, and refer to the two policies. And
Or
then
I kind of like
the ideas.
I kind of like
Either
the
way.
idea of just that regulation, just basically referring to the handbook, because the handbook may change on a year-to-year basis.
Correct.
So if that regulation just refers to that handbook for this, specifications of what is required and expected of our students.
Conveniently, I still had my student handbook open from
Of course you did.
yesterday.
It's a pretty detailed.
It's super
long-
detailed.
Oh, it is detailed.
It's like even the kids don't. It's like really.
So there's legal references
Principles,
and
schoolwork.
policy references in there.
Is there? Okay.
So,
It's a
when-
lot of work just to
Well,
enforce that.
I know.
It's a full-time
also-
job.
It is, a principal's full-time
Yeah.
job. So, and when Mrs. Roden worked over the course of the summer, from spring to the publication, that's also a tremendous amount of detailed, oriented work. A very keen eye goes into the cross-referencing, and I am confident not only in the enforcement at the school level, but making sure that I appreciate the board's leadership in making sure that we have school-level endorsement on this, and we do. And I believe that we are in shape to continue to enforce our dress code without disruption because of this policy in its first reading.
Okay. Principles are. I just like I say. Like in the handbook, less is more. Not clothes. Rules.
Right.
Less is more.
That's not our handbook. We got a lot of.
That's what I mean. It's like really. That's a lot of work for principals and teachers to follow the dress code every day. It's like they've got.
And to be honest, as
So-
long as it's not causing a disruption in the class, seriously.
So I would like to see it simplified, and because when I taught, it's like, okay, they'd show up first hour. I'm like, okay, go in the closet, put on that ugly T-shirt, and that's what you're going to wear the rest of the day, because you just won't deal with it.
I think certainly as we look at all of the policies that seem to surface that require our attention, we can bring this up to the principals. And I, again, want their endorsement of their practices. We want a document that supports their enforcement
Yes.
at the school
and
level.
what's going to make it easy for
Right.
them and the
And-
kids to be successful.
Right, and that may or may not be a change. If it
Right.
is, I'm open to that conversation, and if they're happy with this, then I'm
Okay.
open to that too.
Then I'm happy too.
Okay, good. So that's kind of what went on with the dress code policy, not in a nutshell.
Well, thank you because I know I was the one that asked the question, whether or not the principals had been asked. So I am happy with that answer. So if there's no other discussion, I would like to make a motion to approve the first reading of policy JICA and JICAR.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Patty Trey.
Aye.
Joshua Judge.
Aye.
Tori Anderson.
Aye.
Ben Owens.
Aye. All right, very good. Motion carries. All right, we are on to item 8C. Approved to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ARS 15-843A6. The board may convene an executive session to consider and take action on a student appeal matter for Dr. Lopman. And then, board, help me out here.
Yes.
You can read
Do I read
motions.
D also?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
All
then we
right.
can take a vote all at
Perfect.
one time.
All right, and along with this, with C, we're also looking at D, approved to adjourn to executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A7. The board may convene in executive session to discuss and consult with its representatives concerning the purchase, sale, or lease of real property. That's a
Motion.
mouthful.
Good. Motion to approve to go into executive session A, C, and AD.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Patty Trey.
Aye.
Joshua Judge.
Aye.
Tori Anderson.
Aye.
Ben Owens.
Aye. Very good. Motion carries. It is 8:10 PM, and we are,
Going into
In there.
executive session.
going into executive session.
And then we'll come back out here
To
to adjourn.
Yep.
And,
Do we need to bring our laptops?
yes, if you want all this information.
Lisa?
I'm going to give you that, Lisa. now.